It's Joe Kopsik, December 7th, 2021, and I'm going to weigh in on the Jussie Smollett case, which is about to conclude in Chicago. And I've been following this case since it started. I've been looking at both sides of the story, entertaining the possibility that the attack didn't happen, but also, more importantly, I think, because it's been ignored and downplayed and shushed, the possibility that the attack did happen and that Jussie Smollett did not commission or contract the attack against him. Here's what I wrote a few days about this, just so you can prepare yourself for when he is inevitably found not guilty. Jussie Smollett is not guilty. His supposed inconsistency about the identity of his attackers has been exaggerated and largely made up. He and his lawyer Mark Garagos have explained that they believe the attackers to have been the Osundairo brothers dressed up as white people, possibly through the use of ski masks, and wearing red hats meant to imitate the pro-Trump MAGA hat, which they were filmed buying at a store. They were filmed buying it. The shopkeep has said that the Osundairo brothers asked for MAGA hats, Make America Great Again, for Donald Trump, but couldn't get them. They couldn't get the specific MAGA hats they wanted with MAGA on the front, so they got plain red hats that looked close enough. They were also filmed buying rope, like the rope seen hanging around Jussie Smollett's neck in the video when police came to his house. And they also bought at least one black ski mask with eye holes, probably two. You can only see one in the video, but there's probably two. The allegation that the brothers yelled, "This is MAGA country," in Democratic stronghold Chicago does not make the attack impossible. Just because Chicago is Democratic doesn't mean you can't attack a guy while yelling Republicans are great or Trump is great. Someone who is crazy enough to attack a guy on the street at 2 a.m. would be crazy enough to scream a lie about Chicago being MAGA country, which it is not. Attackers lie. They beat people, they steal, they lie to get away with it. That's what they do. You don't trust someone who someone's claiming just beat a guy up and put a noose around his neck. Just because he lies doesn't mean the whole thing didn't happen. If Smollett's and Garagos' claims about the attackers wearing white masks are true, and the attack really did happen, then it seems the Osundairo brothers posed as white people, aka white Trump supporters who would wear MAGA hats and hate black people and yell the N-word and the F-word, to decrease the chance that they'd be arrested because they were obviously African immigrants who weren't, the typical white Republican Trump voter. If they posed as white people, they would never get caught, they thought. If the attack really did happen, and Smollett didn't have advanced knowledge of it, then it seems likely that Smollett's attackers did racketeering by heightening the threat against Smollett to increase the amount he'd be willing to pay for the training it would require to protect himself. Just like the government does to us when they promise to protect us as long as we give them more money for police every year and let the cops kill us on the side of the road enough. Despite suggestions that Smollett paid for the attack against him with the $3,500 check, Smollett's check to the brothers was for training and diet instruction, which was written on the memo line of the check. Also, the brothers had cutout magazines at their homes, which explains the ransom note Smollett received and stayed quiet about to not attract attention to himself that he received days prior to the alleged attack. The note was badly written in poor English. There was a handwritten Jussie Smollett's name and address on the front, and then there were ransom note letters too. But the parts that were handwritten, it was badly written. And coincidentally, the Osundairo brothers are recent immigrants who have learned English recently. And that ransom note was the first thing that made Smollett think he needed to get buff for protection in addition to his role on TV. That's what I think. In addition to cutout magazines, bleach was found at the Osundairo brothers' home. Now, bleach doesn't freeze outside as long as you store it indoors before taking it outside. That explains how the bleach could have been poured onto Smollett despite the cold temperature. So it was a polar vortex in Chicago. It was very low temperature, and people were saying bleach freezes at that low a temperature. Well, what if you keep it inside your house and then you go, hey, I'm going to attack this guy, and then you bring it outside? It probably doesn't freeze before you get it and pour it on the guy. So that's how bleach could have been used. Smollett's detractors have even pointed to the temperature that night in Chicago as a reason why Smollett and his attackers wouldn't or couldn't be outdoors at that time anyway. Well, as a native of the Chicago area and a former resident of Wisconsin, I can assure you that whoever thinks a drug user who's from Chicago won't go out in 20 below weather at 2 a.m. to get a sandwich when he's high. Whoever's telling you that that couldn't happen is a pussy, or they're not from the Midwest. The man wanted a sandwich. He was training at the time. He needed eggs. His trainer, one of the Osundairo brothers, told him to eat 4 eggs a day. He probably saw a 2 a.m. jog to Subway or the grocery store, which is his first trip, Walgreens. He probably saw it as a resistance workout. He's trying to toughen himself up, get himself used to low temperatures. You keep moving, you sweat enough so that you barely notice the cold. Leave the man alone. Walgreens was closed. He can't buy the eggs he wanted, so he gets the next best thing, a tuna fish sandwich from Subway. And yes, there have been people who have claimed that substituting tuna fish for eggs doesn't make sense, and that's why the attack couldn't have happened. It still could have. The sandwich has nothing to do with it. Focus on the evidence, people. Not every minor inconsistency that you think is an inconsistency is actually inconsistent or actually has to do with the tangible physical evidence that's at the core of the case, like the masks, the bleach, and the rope, and the ski masks. Smollett did not keep the noose around his neck for theatrics, as his detractors claim. He did it to preserve the evidence as close as possible to the way it was during the attack, without continuing to choke himself. We still don't know just how tightly he claims the rope was pulled around his neck anyway. He claims that after the fight was over, that's when he noticed that the rope was there, because he was busy getting his ass whooped, in his own words. So if the attack did happen, it'll need to be explained how tightly that rope was pulled. He probably doesn't know. If the attack did happen, then one of his attackers would know. The fact that the incident wasn't filmed doesn't prove conclusively that the alleged attack didn't happen or that it couldn't have happened. The only people we're being asked to believe about the videotape and the alleged confessions, both of which probably did not happen, are the Chicago police, the second most heavily funded city police department in the country, which hounded Smollett for financial reparations to the city for the cost of a trial, reparations which he gladly paid in the form of money and community service. He did this not as part of admitting guilt or a plea deal, but as something he did voluntarily out of a feeling of duty to his city, to compensate them for the cost they undertook investigating his still unsubstantiated allegations. The reason why Smollett was reluctant to hand his phone over to the authorities is probably a combination of 1, private photos, and 2, his reluctance to reveal his recent communications with the Osundairo brothers, which would have shown how stupid Smollett was to fail to figure out that the guys who attacked him on the street, the people who sent him the threatening letter, and his trainers were all the same people. He was probably realizing this as the police were coming, or right when they arrived. I say this because that's what Smollett says happened. The first question he was asked in the trial when he defended himself was, why were you reluctant to hand your photos and your phone over to the police? And he said, because privacy was a more important concern to me at the time. Might say something about the photos he had, and they would have found out, as they have now found out, that he was having a sexual relationship, as he recently claimed, with one of the Osundairo brothers. I think they've denied it. So don't pretend, here's another thing, don't pretend that the fact that some actors can cry on cue means that Smollett's tears in his ABC interview were fake. He wasn't faking tears. He was smiling through tears while trying to fight them back so he can continue talking without getting too emotionally disturbed. And he was doing this while recounting a traumatic event. He was crying because he was remembering the traumatic event, but he was smiling through tears because he was trying to stay positive for his interview and continue to be able to talk without breaking down and crying. Let's not pretend that the fact that some actors can cry on cue means that every actor can cry on cue. And let's not pretend the fact that some actors can cry on cue means that no actors can ever become the victim of a violent attack. They can. The fact that Smollett and the Osundairo brothers hung out together on the day before the attack does not prove that any sort of dress rehearsal for the attack took place. If you think about it, the fact that the brothers were filmed buying the rope, hats, and masks used in the alleged attack, and the fact that they and Smollett were filmed nearby where the attack occurred around the same time, it seems like the attack probably did happen. It just wasn't caught on film. And the fact that it wasn't caught on film, meaningless. Not everything can be caught on film. If the attack really was planned in advance, maybe even with the help of politicians, then you'd think there would have been footage. But no, Smollett's critics used the fact that no footage of the attack emerged. They used that to ridicule Smollett's claim on the basis of there being no evidence. That's a fine position to take, but it still doesn't prove the attack didn't happen. Now, Jussie Smollett's "I'm the gay Tupac" quote, meaningless. At least in that it tells you nothing about what really happened the night of the alleged attack, or about the physical evidence. He also said, "I feel like if I had said it was a Muslim or a Mexican or someone black, i.e., someone who attacked him, I feel like the doubters would have supported me much more." Now, that quote, also meaningless, unless you're intent on purposely misconstruing his every statement as a black guy being racist against white people. "I don't trust the police." That's what Smollett said. These quotes are not Smollett criticizing the police out of nowhere for no reason and unprompted. He said these things as answers to questions that he was asked. He was asked, "Why didn't you call the police immediately after the alleged attack?" And he says, "I don't trust the police." When black people are stopped by the police and they get shot, it's not because they were mouthing off. I don't know who needs to hear this, white people, old white people, but it was more likely because they made a quote unquote wrong move that the officer, usually unfairly, interpreted as aggressive and decided they need to shoot the motherfucker. It shouldn't be news to anyone that a black man would be scared to call the police, even after an attack. That's not an indictment of the entire system, it's just how he feels. You can't deny how one person says they feel. Dave Chappelle himself, one of Smollett's chief detractors and critics, has joked about not calling the police after his house was robbed because he thought the police would never believe that he lived in such a nice house. Stop overanalyzing Smollett's statements. There are fewer contradictions in what he's saying than you think there are. Stop overanalyzing Smollett's body language. Look at the physical evidence of the case: the rope, the bleach, the ski masks, etc. Jussie Smollett and his lawyer Mark Garagos have not been allowed until recently, to present their side of the story, unencumbered by the claims of the police. Smollett's ABC interview was picked apart by self-anointed body language experts on YouTube who projected whatever they wanted to see onto what Smollett said and the way he was quote-unquote acting, which he wasn't. They even told their own jokes. Just they're playing Jussie Smollett interview and heckling, freeze framing and heckling over it. They don't even have ideas. They're just trying to find that Chewbacca moment, that thing that doesn't make sense. One thing that doesn't make sense. Doesn't matter whether it affects the physical evidence. Doesn't matter how much it affects the tangible evidence of the case. If they see one inconsistency, even, eggs versus tuna, they're going to pick it apart. The guy eating a sandwich instead of eggs doesn't mean the attack couldn't have happened. Saying you're gay Tupac doesn't mean that people can't put a fucking rope around your neck. Okay? Jussie Smollett is not a crisis actor. He has explained in the trial how he got a higher salary for his role on that show, and he didn't need to concoct a fake attack, which he didn't do, in order to get more money, because he was already making $100,000 a season. Don't let the Chicago PD keep shaking Jussie Smollett down for his money. Don't take away his freedom. Stop the public lynching of Jussie Smollett.